All right, y'all. Welcome. Good evening. You're truly Dr. Pierre, bringing you a special edition of our Real Physician React series. This is our live series we do every Thursday evenings, going live on TikTok. So if you're listening to the podcast episode or watching the YouTube replay, you should know that you should be on TikTok to catch this live to join the chat, right? So I suggest you do that like ASAP. Again, Thursday evening, 9 p.m. Obviously, this is a special one, especially if you're watching this, because as you see, I'm in my work clothes. I am on nights this week, and typically when I'm on nights, it can get a little hectic. But I do always, again, because I like to keep my promise, I try to squeeze this thing in regardless, right? So now, I typically have a list of topics that I like, all right, what am I going to speak about today? And unfortunately, the Supreme Court dropped this bombshell, if you could read the title, right into my lap. And you may be thinking, all right, Dr. Barry, like, how does this tie into healthcare? Like, why are you even speaking on the Supreme Court and college admissions? And why is it important as a physician? And obviously, being a Black physician, why should that be important? And I'm going to tell you, right? Because I have a lot of things to say. Now, mind you, one thing my parents always told me, right? If you do not have nothing nice to say, try to keep it to yourself. Try to keep it to yourself. And trust me, I did that. I just threw a, I think it was even, I don't think I posted on my Twitter. It was like an Instagram story. I said, hey, since the Supreme Court got so much time, right, to be worried about college admissions, maybe they should also look at nepotism and how that affects college admissions. Like, if they really want to turn some things up, instead of going after affirmative action, right, to get this hoopla that you got, you should start looking at nepotism. And those who may not know how nepotism works, it's, hey, my granddad, my grandma, my mom, my dad, my aunt, my uncle, someone I know, right, like, has some pull here. And even though I don't have the numbers, the test scores, grades, everything to be in this position here, in this school here, but because I know the right people was causing people not to get into Harvard and Columbia and Penn and all of that. No, like, we hope that's not the case. But we know what the smoke screen is with this fight here, right? So for those who may not know, Supreme Court said, hey, you know what? Harvard and what was it? UNC, your policies for admissions are unlawful, unjustified, and we're striking it, which essentially is the fight against affirmative action, saying, hey, if Harvard and UNC can't use race-based factors in their decisions on who should they take in their school, we don't want no other schools do it, right? So that's the trickle-down effect that we see. And of course, again, if you're on social media or you watch the news, you see there's a lot of news, a lot of fanfare from it, right? Interesting enough, there's people who I didn't expect to, say something against the Supreme Court's decision that actually said something to it. I ain't gonna give it no shine, but like, I was just shocked to see, like, oh, that's interesting that you actually said something up for it. Now, of course, me being a Black physician, I recognize wholeheartedly that there are probably people, even year 2023, who think that somehow, some way, like, the position I'm in was from affirmative action, whether it's in undergrad, whether it was in medical school, whether it was in residency, somehow, some way, I know there's someone out there in the US of A who think that the reason why I got in my position was from action. I understand that. Whatever, right? Nothing I can do about that. So I think we have to talk about the importance of just affirmative action, and more importantly, like, how does it affect healthcare? Because again, I am a physician, right? So you may be thinking, man, like, yeah, like, they're just talking about, Harvard and UNC, like how is this going to actually trickle down to the healthcare that we see today? And right, and why is it important? Why was it, I guess, especially because they struck it down, why was it important in our history of getting healthier in this country, especially as a minority, right? So I want to talk about a couple things, right? A couple points, and then we'll be going into the comments and answering questions and fielding questions as we can, right? So when we talk about what are some of the consequences for a decision like this, right? And again, not necessarily immediate, but definitely down the line. What are some of the consequences for this decision? you're going to ultimately continue, and I want to stress this, continue to see less diversity amongst your healthcare professionals. Like, that's going to happen. Because remember, for me to get right here, to be talking to you guys, while sitting, in this call room, I had to get accepted to undergrad, get accepted to medical school, and then get accepted to a residency, and then obviously pass all of the things I needed to pass that. So there was a couple of steps I had to get through. And I wish I could say, oh yeah, no way in hell that they use race as a factor, but I don't know. In fact, I'm going to tell my story of how I even got into medical school, right? And then you can kind of figure out like who is, how did I get here, right? In fact, when I think about my story, I feel like nepotism, right, or just being a legacy kind of assisted in that, right? So let's talk about just my story. So I am an undergrad student at Florida State. Again, I already got to Florida State, so I ain't no one at Florida State, so you really can't get me there. I don't know in Florida State, but I'm a third year junior. I'm a junior at Florida State. Say I want to go to medical school. I passed by this building because I got to Florida State. I'm in Tallahassee, and it just says FOMA on it, Florida Osteopathic Medical Association. I don't know what that is. So I figure, all right, I don't know what FOMA is. I'm going to drive into the building. So I drive into the building. I introduce myself to the secretary. I say, hey, I'm a pre-med student. I'm interested in getting into medical school. Like, what do y'all do? Because again, I have no clue. I've never seen this acronym FOMA. And here comes this, this tall, like, muscular guy. And I didn't know who he was, right? But he was a physician. Right? I said, hey, you know what? I'm Dr. Thacker. I am the president of FOMA. At the time, I didn't know he was the president, right? But again, it didn't really matter to me. And, this is what I do. I explain to him, I kick it. I'm good with the gift of gab, right? We make a connection. And subsequently, throughout my time at Florida State, Dr. Thacker would invite me to dinners. He would invite me to volunteer opportunities, healthcare opportunities, health fairs and whatnot. And when I was asking, he was asking me, hey, where are you applying to? I'm like, I'm applying to, all of these Florida schools because I'm a Florida boy. I don't want to go out of Florida. So I said, he said, like, oh, you should apply to Nova. And I was like, oh, what's Nova? He said, oh, that's Osteopathic Medical School. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't think nothing that for sure I'll apply. Mind you, I applied to Nova. Let's say I applied to Nova, on the 1st. By the 15th, I've already gotten a decision to say, hey, we want to interview you. All right. I'm like, cool. That's cool. Like, I had a couple of interviews, but I'm like, all right, cool. I go down, I do an interview, I kill the interview, right? Because again, that's what I do, right? And then like a week and a half later, boom, you're accepted, right? So within 3 weeks of applying to the school, I was accepted into the school. And I ain't know nothing of it, right? I'm just happy, I'm excited. And then I start, researching, right? Because, I go to, ask people like, hey, like, how'd you get here? I go to research and I find out not only is Dr. Thacker the president of FOMA, again, because I didn't know who he was at the time. He was an alumni at Nova Southeastern University. And he was like, again, a pretty big wig just in the state of Florida. So here I was, this person who he didn't even write a letter of recommendation for me, right? Who just recommended, hey, go to apply here. I know some people. And 3 weeks later, I was accepted into school, right? This happens across the country, right? Where knowing who you needed to know makes your process a lot easier. So I got into medical school. Obviously, the rest is history. I'm here. A lot of people don't have that opportunity. A lot of people don't have the connections. So when you talk about this striking down on affirmative action, you are definitely going to see a decrease in just the number of physicians. And mind you, there are about 5.7% of all physicians in this country are Black, right? 5.7%. That number is already trash, and that number is going to get worse. Because, and again, it makes sense if you think about it. If the policies that help increase the enrollment in undergrads decreases, guess what? If I have less undergrads getting into school, then I'm going to have less undergrads who say, hey, I want to be a doctor. Less undergrads who apply for medical school. This year, was one of the worst years for Black males actually even applying to medical school. That's a whole nother problem. So I have less people getting into undergrad, less people saying, I want to become a doctor, less people applying to medical school. So I'm going to have, at the end result, less physicians, less healthcare professionals. And we know that our community does much better when taking care of someone from our community. And when I say R, it doesn't matter who the R is, right? If you're in a Hispanic community, you do much better when you're taken care of by Hispanic patients, right? Physicians. If you're in a Black community, you do much better when you're taken care of by Black physicians, right? So you're having this instance where our numbers are just going to continue to dwindle down and is eventually going to be a detriment to the communities that need to serve them, right? We have about 13% of Black people here in this country. Again, right now, the physician force only makes up 5.7%. That number is going to get worse. And you figure our percentage is going to get higher, right? So that's just going to be a mismatch problem when we think about it. And because you have less people who look like me being in the healthcare position to take care of our people, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have more healthcare disparities, right? You're going to have more people who don't go to the doctor, more people who don't get their health checkups, more people who deal with hypertension at a later age, cancer at a later age, diabetes at a later age, strokes, like any medical disease you can think about, that's going to also worsen because the people who would be on this side here taking care of the community, there's going to be less of us to be there for it, right? So it's just going to be, again, just a hamster wheel effect that will eventually hit healthcare, right? Again, this is not going to be a thing that happens tomorrow, but this is going to be something that is going to eventually trickle down and affect us more, right? Oh, and I got my points here. Oh, this is a big one. Less representation, not only in medical research, right, but in clinical trials, right? Because you have, again, it's just the bottleneck effect. Less of us coming in, which means less of us going into working on the clinical trials, working on research, being active in promoting research, being active in saying, hey, this is what the research is saying. There's just going to be less of us, right? Again, I am keenly aware, right, that just me being a Black male and a physician puts me at a different plane, right? Because there's not a lot of me's who do what I do, right? Talk, podcast. There's not a lot of me's to do that. So I stand out, again, there's not a lot of me's in general, right? But then when you think about the me's who are on social media, who are doing educating our communities, it's just less and less and less, right? Like that's really the problem at hand, right? So you're going to have less of us in these trials, leading these trials, promoting these trials. And because you have less of us at the top, guess what? You're going to have less of us continuing at the bottom. One thing about medical trials, and I have a public health degree, and one of the things we always tend to look at is just the participation of segment groups within clinical trials. Whether it's a trial for a new medication, a new prescription, a new therapy, when less of us, right, less Black folks, less Hispanic folks, less whatever, right, are in the trials, guess what happens, right? You have an answer, right? You have, hey, at the end, I got this result, but I don't know if this result really applies to this specific community. So we tend to see that a lot where you may, let's say, drug A. Drug A works great for blood pressure. And because that's what the trials tell it, until you start giving drug A to this specific community here, and you see, all right, it doesn't really work as well as we expected. So if it doesn't work as well as we expected, guess what happens, right? You start saying like, oh, like this medication doesn't work. They don't know what they're doing. But when you start backtracking, you see, well, probably the reason why it doesn't work is because when they started doing the trials, less of us was in there to test it out. So you just have this issue that, again, just kind of, and again, we dealt with it, especially with COVID, right? When we were talking about COVID, one of the bonuses, right? I don't say bonus, but one of the benefits of COVID and a lot of the COVID trials is that we had significant participation in COVID trials, especially for the COVID vaccine. Significant participation, much more than we've ever seen, right? Because so many people are getting it, so many people are afraid. They're like, nah, I want to join the trial to get that medication. So our participation numbers were through the roof in regards to the COVID vaccine. It's the reason why the COVID vaccine worked so well, right, for all the communities, because guess what? We showed up. But now when the next blood pressure medication, the next diabetes medication, the next weight loss medication, the next cholesterol medication, the next cancer drug, when the next thing comes out, guess what? Because we don't show out, right? Because we're not at the top, we're not represented, and we don't have people like me in the field saying, hey, you should go and get this study. Guess what? It's going to be less and less of us going to it, right? So it's just going to begin just a tenfold. I don't want to say tenfold, but it's going to be just a numbers game, right? When you see just how detrimental it's going to be to our community. And I already talked about increased health disparities. Oh, and then just less cultural competency care, right? Like cultural competency is one of these things that is like a buzzword, and we talk about it a lot during medical school for like a semester, right? Let's just say semester. All right, yes, we're going to be culturally competent. And then what happens, right, is that you go through the course like, all right, boom, thank you I'm culturally competent now, until you have to go see patients. And then you realize what it truly means to be culturally competent, what it means to be respectful to your patients, what it means to be respectful to your patients' ideals, to your patients' traditions. Like, it's a whole different ball game when you're reading it in a book. But when you actually have to put it into practice, it's another ballgame. And those who come from the community that you come from, right, are able to recognize like, oh, hey, you know what? When they say the sugars, right, they mean diabetes, right? When they say this, oh, this is what they really mean. But if you don't come from that community, you're going to miss what it's going to seem like an obvious tale from the patient perspective, but you're going to miss that. And if you miss it, and guess what? Like, all right, we're not on the same page. Guess what? I got to go find me a new doctor, right? Because I don't know what you're talking about, right? And this happens every day. So there's just so many problems that are going to continue to arise. Again, I don't want to say I'm not worried about the admissions perspective, right? Because a lot of the schools, right, kind of knew what time it was, and they were already tinkering with different ways to work on diversity. So this isn't going to be a damning effect, right, to the Harvards of the world, right? This is not going to be that, right? But it could be a problem to the regular undergrads of the world who used to use it to boost up their diversity, and now they got to think of something different. Because let me tell you, the real honest truth is that when it comes to admissions, right? When it comes to undergrad, medical school, residency, when it comes to that, a lot of people are very lazy, right? Those who are in the position of accepting new students are very lazy, right? They want to have a very cookie cutter approach to do it, right? They want to be able to say, oh, you have to have this test score and this GPA, because they know if they do that, right, that's all they need to kind of weed out a lot of people, right? They don't have to actually read your personal statement. They don't actually have to have a good interview and know what the person is talking about, because it doesn't matter to them, because they're like, let me just weed out a whole bunch of people who will probably be great fits for my school, but because I don't want to have to go through all of these applications, I need to find a way to sort it out, right? And that is what's going to be, and especially, now mind you, let me tell you, folks have been, especially, I'll just talk in the medical GME perspective, graduate medical education. Folks have been using race-based related decisions on how to weed people out forever, right? Like, I was a program director. We had a lot of students match, right, into a residency program. But to match into the residency program, they had to get interviewed, right? They had to go through that whole process of the ERAS. That whole ERAS system, if I want to, I can say, you know what? I only want to speak to white applicants from the state of Florida who have a board score of this, who have a GPA of that, right? I can do all of that, like, very easily. right? So it's always been there, the ability to kind of weed people out based on race, based on gender, based on, what school they went to. That's not going to change. Like it's just going to be harder for those who are in these colleges to try to think of different ways to improve the lack of diversity that it is. Right? Because when we talk about affirmative action, we know that it didn't just come out of nowhere, right? What happened was that, hey, you know what? We were having systemic processes to exclude us, right? Especially Black folks. We were having systemic processes to exclude Black people out of the educational system, right? So we couldn't have legacies, right? We couldn't have multiple legacies at Harvard and Penn. We couldn't have it because guess what? They were doing their best, right, systemically to get them out of there, right? They did it for so long that the government had to say, you know what? We have to make another systemic process to try to get people back in, right? And people are okay, right? Especially those who are like jumping for joy that affirmative action has been rejected. They're okay with all of the systemic racism that and classism and the gender that said, hey, you know what? I only want white men like going into these positions right here. They're 100% okay with that. They hate the fact that, hey, we're trying to correct this thing. The best way we kind of know how to is kind of use affirmative action. They want no parts of the correction of the problem, right? Like, say, I always equate it with like COVID, right? A lot of people, right, are okay with the COVID, right? They hate the COVID vaccine, right? They hate the treatment of it, but they're okay with the effects of COVID, right? Same thing. They're okay with the effects of systemic racism for years, right? Decades, right? Decades, hundreds, they're okay with that, but they're not okay with, hey, we got to try to correct this. Like, and let's do this thing called affirmative action to kind of correct it. Which we all know. You just do a quick study, a quick Google search of who benefits from affirmative action. It's not even people of color, even though that was the goal. Not even people of color, it's white women, right? Why? Because not only was affirmative action extremely beneficial for people of color, but it was extremely beneficial for women, right? So once it was beneficial for the women, people were like, hey, you know what? If I gotta choose, I'm gonna choose the white women, right? So that's what was happening. They're like, if I gotta choose, I'm gonna make more white women come in here, right? So you have this process that we know is much more beneficial for white women, right? And the people of color are like, hey, since we got this thing here, we got to bring you along. We just kind of came there, and this fallacy that we weren't qualified, because I'm seeing the comments. I'm gonna discuss them in a minute. This fallacy that we weren't qualified to be there is total farce, right? We've been new. We had the numbers, we had the grades. But when you have a systemic process that says, I don't care if they have the numbers, they have the grades, I still don't want them there, right? Like when you have that, you can't win, right? But thankfully, we had affirmative action to at least try to curtail it. Now, again, I think you have, this instance here where if you are a professional, especially if you're a Black professional, you have to be very weary, like, all right, like I see what's going on over here. Right, I see the play, and I need to see what am I going to do to try to help, because now the onus of helping the pipeline becomes even more apparent that, hey, I got to help out even at the beginning, because if I don't help out at the beginning, there's not going to be too many people that look like me when I'm trying to retire. When I'm trying to get up out of here and hang up my stethoscope, there's not going to be a lot of people who look like me if I don't do a better job talking to pre-meds, if I don't do a better job talking to elementary school, middle school, high school, say, hey, you should like science. If I don't do a better job like at the beginning, right, to make it so that they have all of these hurdles because there are going to be some hurdles that they have to jump over, it's going to be a problem at the end. Right, because we know, right, the Supreme Court already told you, we already know that the system is okay with us not being represented at the end. They're 100% okay with that. So what we have to do is say, you know what, I definitely got to put much more onus, much more focus in the beginning. And I've always been and I think that's just me, right? I've always been someone who tried to focus on my pre-meds, my medical students. Like I always want to focus on there. I write letters all the time letters of recommendation all the time. DM me, right, if you have any questions or concerns, especially for my pre-meds out here, because I know that we need all the help we can get, right? Because I know there's not too many of us who can write a letter, more importantly, a good letter. Because again, as a program director, I probably read, because I was a program director for 4 years of an internal medicine program, I probably read about 32 to 3,600 letters of recommendation. Because I'm factoring, I read about 400 applications a year. Usually they include about 3 letters of recommendation. And so about, that many letters of recommendation, like just in that span of time. So I know what are good and what are right? Like it just is. So not only do we have to be there to be able to write a good one, and you'd be surprised because there's a lot of people who have no problem writing you terrible letters. No problem writing you terrible letters, right? Like it just is what it is. So be able to write good ones, right? So we have to be much more proactive in reaching out, reaching back. And because a lot of us will get through the door, and we kind of close it behind us. We say, hey, you know what? I'm already here. Like I did the hard work, nothing for me to do, right? But we got to get through the door, keep our foot through the door, let everyone get in through the club. Like, especially if you got to go through the back, let everybody get in the club. Then we say, okay, all right, there's enough of us. All right, now I don't need to hold the door open anymore. Like that's what it is. Like it just has to be done for sure, right? So let's get to some comments, right? Let's get to some comments because I think it's gonna be because I saw some funny ones I wanted to touch on for sure. Jamie says, this decision broke my heart. Yeah, no, it definitely did. Because we know that this, especially again, for those who don't know the origin of it, right? This origin of, going after affirmative action was based, I forget the name of this conservative group, right? But like their goal was, again, to try to, they're same ones who went after Roe versus Wade, these same people, right? Same ilk. Their goal was like, oh, we need to make an example, right? So they get this random student who I'm assuming couldn't get accepted to Harvard and Columbia and all those other schools, right? Because the legacy admissions took all of their spots, right? And for those who don't know, right, especially again, like I said, because I've been a part of the admission process, what typically happens in the setting of admissions, right? Let's say you're Asian, let's say you're white, let's say you're black, let's say you're Hispanic. They put you in a group. They say, hey, you know what? Let me see how Barry has done in comparison to all of the black men that is applying, right? Let me see where he sits there, right? They don't say, let me see how Barry has done in comparison to the white guy, in comparison to the Hispanic guy, in comparison to the Asian. I say, no. Let me see how he's done in comparison to the black guy. And then they kind of do their numbers. But for those who may know, like the person who did not get accepted to Harvard and all those other schools, I'm pretty sure they did the same exact thing to him and say, hey, let me see what this guy has done in comparison to those in his group. And I'm guaranteed he did not do better than those in his group because he didn't get accepted, right? Or he did not know the people that those in his group happen to know, right? Like in legacy admissions, and I saw a lot of people mention it, and nepotism is the big one, right? Legacy admissions, nepotism are so rampant and it's so commonplace that people just recognize that, like, yeah, like I know the only reason why you're here is because your family member owns this building. Like your last name of this building is because of you, right? I know that's because you're not that smart. How many of us, especially those who went in education, like have sat in class and be like, how does this person get here? Like, mind you, I did this when I was in undergrad. I was doing this when I was in when I got into medical school. My first semester, and I would look around the room. And I'm like, some of these folks is not that bright. But and you know what they used to say? You know what they say about the doctor with the lowest, the medical student with the worst grade in the class? You know what they call him or her? Doctor, right? Like that was a common saying. So you had levels even when we talk about medical school, law school, like there's levels, right? And those in the class recognize like, oh, I see where you at. Yeah, you're up there or you're down there, right? So that's a very common thing, right? This is not groundbreaking. So you have this group who says, hey, you know what, we're going to go and we're going to fight this to the top. And of course, right, we talk about how elections matter. When people were saying, this is 2016 elections, right? Because this is all 2016 election issues, where people were saying, oh, Trump, Hillary, same thing, same person, doesn't matter, no difference. It won't affect you locally. This is what people who were discouraging people to vote would say, like, oh, voting for Hillary is like voting for Trump. Like, people were actually saying this. People were actually saying that, which is wow, right? Like, I can't wait till they read it in the history books, and the kids in the future are going to be like, I cannot believe someone voted for a celebrity TV star, right? That's what people are going to say, right, when they read the history books. Like, now, I don't know, the way they're trying to, I'm in Florida, Florida's trying to get rid of all kinds of books, but like, that is the reality that's at hand here, right? 2016 elections, right? We had Trump, right? Mr. Impeached twice, currently indicted, he loaded up the Supreme Court, right? Him and his Congress folks helped load up the Supreme Court. So now in 2023, we're dealing with this effects, right? Roe versus Wade, that's a 2016 issue, right? Affirmative action, 2016 issue. Right? Again, like I said, y'all don't come here for the politics, right? But I feel like whatever field you're in, you should be at least familiar with how politics might affect your field, right? So that's why I can, point clear as day exactly how affirmative action is going to affect healthcare, because I've been keeping an eye on this for a little minute. Yeah. So let's see. Let me see here. All right. Let's see. Make sure we see if we got some questions here. Someone says, I have Miguel says, good, no more race-based discrimination. Again, this is more conservative talking points. You have, if I just want y'all to, when y'all get some time, Google what the percentage is of Black people in Columbia, Penn, Harvard, Yale. Like, just Google what the percentage is of. Right. So when you hear people make it seem like affirmative action was blocking people from getting into, no. It was not affirmative action. It was all of these subpar legacy folks taking up y'all good spots. Let's see. Yes, we need more people who are from the community can translate needs. Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back into what we kind of discussed when we said that if you have less of us, right, whoever the us is for your community, if you have less of you guys representing yourselves in the community, guess what? You're going to have a difficult time trying to talk to your community. You have a difficult time trying to relate to your community, right? Especially in regards to their healthcare needs. Legacy problems, legacy admissions are the real problem of college admissions, right? And that's the thing, right? We all know the reason why they didn't mention, and I'll highlight this. We all know the reason why they didn't even touch legacy admissions, because there's a lot of money behind legacy admissions. There's a lot of money behind legacy admissions. So you start talking about oh yeah, we should also go after legacy admissions. Let's let it be about the grades and not about the legacy. Oh, you're going to have a lot of people who have a lot of money who are going to have a lot of problems with certain congressmen, right? And people are going to, politics, and money kind of grease the wheel. So yeah, legacy problems is definitely an issue for sure. Let's see. Yeah, definitely says the small colleges, and this is kind of in reference to who's going to be affected, right? Because obviously they mentioned Harvard, they mentioned UNC. These are pinnacle colleges, pinnacle institutions. But when we talk about how this is going to affect the smaller programs, the smaller schools, it's going to be detrimental, right? But again, you're going to have, and for those who try to apply to college, I don't want to say it's not difficult, right? Because certain colleges are, right? Because again, just as never game, right? But if you want to go to college, you can get into a college. Now, could I get into Harvard? No, right? Because I know I don't have the grades to be getting to Harvard, but more importantly, I know I didn't have the people in my back pocket to get me to Harvard, right? So there are certain levels, right? And we know, right, that those who like want to get to that level here. They kick and scream when they think that they deserve to be at a Harvard, they deserve to be at Yale. Like I think it wasn't last month, I think a month or so ago, we talked about that medical student, or no, that pre-med student. Was it pre-med? Yeah, pre-med student, like who applied to all of those Texas schools and was getting rejected left and right. This was kind of the same affirmative action play. Like, oh, they're not accepting me because I'm a white man. No, they're not accepting you because you don't got the grades and you don't know the people you should know to get into that school. Like that's how it always is. Everything. Someone says they're discriminating against Asians because they're too smart. No, that's definitely not the case here, right? Let's point this out again. There is no right, but again, this is the rhetoric, right, that's been put out there, right, that affirmative action specifically is discriminatory against the Asian community. And because of affirmative action, more of the Asian community can get into schools. Again, I implore everyone, when you're done watching this, to Google the same schools, right? Harvard, Yale, Penn, Columbia, right? And Google what their Asian population is in those schools versus what the Black population is in those schools, right? Just, right? Like, because if a quick Google will show you like, oh, okay, clearly if one group like is going to be upset at the percentages, it ain't going to be the Asian community, right? It's not, right? But again, what typically happens because of those schools, right? The upper echelon, quote unquote, schools accept the best of the best in terms of grades. If you don't know who you're supposed to know and you don't have those grades that are out because again, they see high board scores all day, every day. So imagine if they see everyone with high GPA, everyone has high board scores like SATs, ACTs, you not impressing them just because you got high numbers, right? All of our applications look like this, except the legacy ones. Right? And again, let me not rag on legacy. I'm not saying those who are legacy can't also be a part of the high test score, high board group. I'm just saying those who are legacy don't have to be. That's all I'm saying. So I don't want people to run here and say, oh, I'm a legacy and I got, start DM me test scores and everything. I'm not saying that those legacy folks aren't a part of the high academic achieving folks. I'm just saying that those in legacy, it's a lot easier for you to do it, right? Like that's usually not the name of the game. Let's see here. Someone says the true problem is diversity shouldn't be a factor if one race can't make the cut. Oh well, right? And again, this is a user, someone's telephone number, right? Who says that we shouldn't be using diversity as a factor, right? Again, these are people who are saying that I'm okay with the systemic racism. I'm 100% okay with the systemic racism that made it so that we even have to even talk about diversity, right? Y'all are the reason, right? I don't say y'all, right? When I say y'all know who I'm talking about. Y'all are the reason why we even have to even talk about diversity. Y'all are the reason why we have to have diversity, and equity groups, and we have to have a slip. Like y'all are the reason why, because systemically y'all oppressed us, kept us out for so long that now y'all just look crazy when your boardroom looks like, oh, hold on a second. Gotta work. So what I was saying, yeah. So again, the admission folks, right? Like again, the legacy folks, again, I'm not saying that you guys aren't a part of scholastic crowd. I'm just saying that it's easy, right? And I'm saying that those who are okay with the systemic racism, right, and the decades, the centuries of systemic racism that y'all did, y'all are the reason why we have to talk about diversity now. No, trust me, we don't want to have to talk about diversity. We don't want to have to talk about it. We just know that the only reason we have to talk about it, right, is because systemically y'all kept us out. And y'all look so crazy of keeping us out. Boom, here we are. Let's see. Oh, we got the reverse discrimination card. Again, you remember you can't have reverse discrimination if we're not the ones in power. Right. So even these inroads and fighting that we do, we're still not the majority nowhere in power to make any decisions that would actually be detrimental to the dominant group, which is white men. Right? We're not in that type of power. Well, I think the fear, right? The fear is, hey, you know what? if we let another group get into the power structure or at the level of power that we are, they may want to discriminate against us because when we were in that position, like we did it to them, right? That's always that other side's fear that like if another group gets in that position, that they'll be discriminatory against them because that's what they did when they were in a position. But I can assure you, most people aren't like y'all. And again, I keep saying y'all, but y'all know what time it is. And someone says I was applying this cycle in a really dampened mood. Yeah, no, this is really how it starts. Is that you have those who are going to be great fits to be in someone's school. They're going to be gun shy. They're going to be like, oh, you know what? I don't know if I'm gonna apply to this school right here. I'm gonna apply where like I'll do better in, right? Like, or I'll have a better chance in, right? Because in their eyes, they think, oh, I want to have a better chance because when I look at the admissions and I look at the percentages, it's not a lot of us in those schools anyway. Right? It's not, and mind you, I went to Nova Southeastern, right? Shout out to Nova Southeastern. We had a class of like 200. It was 200. Yeah, 205. 205. And as far as Black students were concerned, we had the most number of Black students like for a while. And I think we had 11. We had 11. And our 11 like would make waves. People were like, oh my God, like it's a lot of y'all in this class. Like that is how, and again, obviously I went to Nova. Nova's a private school, you know, those numbers dwindle. And typically, especially when we think about medical schools, you know, we go to where we typically are going to be at, right? So Duke, North Carolina usually was deep. Morehouse, of course. Mary, of course. Xavier, of course. Deep. But then but again, that's like less than 10. That's like less than 7 schools, right? Like other ones, we got to go somewhere, right? So when we start going, it's very common for us to be in a spot where our percentage of students, Black students, especially for medical school, was like less than 10%. Very common for us. Didn't even shock us. Someone says if you're qualified, you are taken in. No, that's not true, right? And the reason why we know it's not true, right, is because of the fact that the lawsuit, right, was brought on by someone who thought he was qualified. So what you're saying, right, is that this person, right, whose case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, wasn't actually qualified. So if they weren't actually qualified, what are they fighting for? Right? See, this is how you can't have it both ways. If you are saying, oh, if you're qualified, you get in, well, then that's the case. When you don't get in, you shouldn't be crying. You shouldn't be crying. You shouldn't be having no tears, right? You should be like, oh, you know what? I wasn't qualified. But no, what typically happens, those who are used to getting their way are those who think that they deserve a spot. When they don't get in, they start crying. Oh my God, affirmative action. Oh my, the affirmative action took my spot. And again, like I said, when they say affirmative action, they always think about someone like me and not someone who is typically likely white and likely female, right? They never think about that caricature of a person probably taking their spot. It's always someone who looks like me who possibly took their spot. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, we have another people work hard, get good grades. It's no problem. Nah, that's not true. And it's so not true that you don't even. It's like comical, right? And again, like I said, we already talked about systemic racism. We already talked about how when we looked at grades, like when we looked at our test scores, we definitely deserve to be in those spots here. But systemic racism said, "No, we don't want you here." Right, go to these other schools, right? So they would force us away from the schools that our test scores and our test grades said we belong, right? We belong there, but because, systemic issues, aka racism, which again, a lot of people, especially with this decision here, won't accept, right? They will not accept the reason why affirmative action even had to come into play, right? Like that's not something that they won't even grasp it, right? Very weird to me. Yeah, this is shout out to 123 Collins. This country has never been based on merit, right? That's the truth, right? And we, right, Black folks, right, we understand that. we understand, right? You know the old adage of like, all right, you got to do more, you got to do more, you got to do 10% more. Like, we understand that, like, just having the grades, just having the test scores is not enough. Like, we have to go above and beyond, right, to be in the spot, right? So if we can recognize that, hey, yeah, just because you got merit, right, this doesn't mean, just because you got the test scores doesn't mean you should be in the school. Why is this person here who didn't get accepted to Harvard or UNC or wherever he didn't get accepted to, right, fighting it all the way to the Supreme Court, right? Because he's in the La La Land and wants to blame affirmative action for taking the one spot that he couldn't get. And mind you, the person who fought this case all over the Supreme Court, it's not like he was not accepted to places, right? It's not like he was not accepted to other places. It's just the fact that they're like, yeah, you can't come to here. And the fact that he couldn't get accepted to here, boom, here we go. Yep, the thing is, the two people have similar test scores. They will choose the white person, right? And the reason why they choose the white person, because typically the person who's doing the choice is likely white, right? And they're typically likely male. Right. So, and again, so we understand, like I talked about, the cultural competency, like being around like-minded, being around your community. If the people who are typically making the decisions are typically white, typically male, who do you think they're likely going to grab? White, male, right? So it's not out of the ordinary. It's not shocking to us, right, when we see the majority white men, right, are in these schools, right? It just is what it is, right? But it's only shocking to other groups when they see that action occur. Let's see. So this is a person here who doesn't know politics, and this is what a Democratic president and Senate, you still lose affirmative action, right? So this is what I talk about. A lot of people aren't really educated in politics, right? This is why I mentioned that, yeah, this case right here was decided in the 2016 election, 7 years ago, right? So that election 7 years ago is what got this case on, is what got Roe versus Wade out of here, right? 2016, right? But those who don't know say something like, oh, it's Biden's fault. I guess. Someone says, how about use MCAT scores, right? So again, this is one of those ones where, again, a lot of people, right? A lot of the these are the bootstrappers, right? A lot of the bootstrappers can't even process that there are systemic processes in place to make it so that it's a much more difficult time for me to take the MCAT than someone who does not come from my community. Right? Think about that, right? There are systemic reasons, systemic processes in place that make it much more difficult for me to take the MCAT than someone else, right? Whether we talk about, did I get the proper education? Was I living in the right zip code, right, to be able to go to the right schools, to have the right teachers, to have the foundation from a scientific standpoint, so that when it is time to take an MCAT, when I'm an undergrad, I'm fully prepared for it. Right? Did my parents have the ability, right, to provide for me and me not have to stress and work during undergrad, right? Let's think about this, right? I'll even cut it short to just undergrad. Like, did I have to work during undergrad, or was I able to just live life during undergrad, go to school, take my test scores and focus on the test, right? Or did I also have to work 30 plus hours to pay the bills that I had during undergrad, because my parents back home, right, couldn't afford to just pay for me, and sometimes I may have to send some money back to the crib, right? These are all real life decisions that typically will affect one community a lot more than affects another community, right? Again, I'll let you put two and two together, right? So when they say, oh, just use the test scores, well, like, I don't have the same, right? And I keep saying but again, let's just think about our community, right? I may not have the same circumstances that make it so that I can just go ahead and take the test score, right? Maybe I can't even afford the test prep. Maybe I have to, borrow my friend's notes, and maybe we have to go in it together and share. Like, there are so many different factors there that if you are on the other side, right? If you are on the admission side, and the only thing you look at is the test score, and you don't look at nothing else, you don't look at the personal statement, you don't read a personal statement, you don't see, all right, where is this person coming from? Well, like, if you don't see these things here, you're already lost. All right, but again, like I said, it's just one of those things where it becomes much more of a nuanced conversation and discussion that has to occur. But a lot of people are not really, they're not, I don't say not ready for it, right? Maybe they just haven't been challenged enough to like ask these type of questions, right? So again, like I said, you say, oh, what about the MCAT scores? Well, there's a lot of different things that lead up to you have to take in that MCAT, right? That other communities don't typically may not have to face and deal with in that process. I think I appreciate you. Shout out to my RNs, right? And again, obviously I talked about doctors, right? But like healthcare professionals just in general, right? There's just going to be less of us everywhere, right? Less of us everywhere. RNs, PT, OT, speech, nursing, like there's going to be less of us everywhere because of that bottleneck effect, because we have less coming in the pipe, right? There's going to be less at the end, right? Because just because you get into undergrad doesn't mean you finish undergrad, right? Just because you get into medical school doesn't mean you finish medical school. Just because you get into residency doesn't mean you finish residency. There's what happens in the middle, right? And that's like, for me, right, to finish medical school and finish residency, I had to take 3 board exams plus three national board exams just to say, hey, yes, I'm a DO, right? And then a national board exam after my residency, right? That's 4 national exam I had to take. What if I'm a bad test taker? What if I have anxiety or stress as a test taker? What if I've always had anxiety or stress because when I was little, right, to take tests, the AC was bad, the school was like, so many different factors that don't even come into play for a lot of people, that when they say like, oh, just focus on the test scores, right, it's disingenuous. And you may not know, right? There are people on this side, people on the academic side, because like I said, I'm in academia. People on the academic side will tell you that an A from this school is different than an A from that school. That's a whole different conversation that we can go into, right? That they look at an A from school A as not as but an A from that school over there, school B, they're like, woo, you got an A over there? We like that. So now when, like, let's say I have the numbers. Let's say I have 4.0 plus, but it's from school A. And the person on the other side is like, oh, but they went to that school, and that school's not that tough of a school. So we're not going to really respect that school here. But another person goes to school B, same numbers, but guess what? Because they went to school B, oh, you know what? They went to school B and got these numbers. You know what? Let's move them up the ranks, right? Again, this is so again, the people who be like, oh, MCAT scores, grades, like I wish it was that easy. I wish it was that easy, but because I know it's not, a decision like this is so, there's the reason why a decision like this is so harmful. Like I said, I posted that thing on my IG story. People everywhere like, oh yeah, and the people who I expected this responded, right? Because we already know, and it was most of my professionals in higher level education, because we know the game that gets played and the game that we had to play to get to where we had to go to, right? So yeah, just definitely, yeah, man, the numbers mean nothing. Trust me. Yes. So let me answer Justin's question. Bad grades are systemic processes. Yes, the answer is yes. We can go long, but the answer is yes. And I think we just answered Scott Realtor's question when he said just use grades and MCAT. Hopefully I answered that question as well of why, we just can't use that. Ooh. Oh, I like that. I love this question here, right? Forget college, just a debt, learn to take trades, network, and lure. Yeah. Especially because we were sold this dream that, right? Yeah, I say dream, right? We were sold this dream that, just go to college and you're good. And what a lot of people recognize, like, oh, me just going to college ain't really guaranteeing me being good. Like it ain't really all cracked up as it be, right? So like the trades aspect of it, and more importantly, that network, right? When we talk about nepotism, when we talk about legacy admissions, like we're saying the buzzword that you hear out now, like, oh, let's go to brunch and network. Let's go to a breakfast and network. Let's go to the golf course and network, right? Like networking will get a person who should not be at Harvard in Harvard. Networking will get a person who shouldn't be in someone's medical school right there the first day of class. And they're looking around. I'm looking at them like, well, how'd you get here? Oh, that's who you knew? Like networking is key. It's something that is not taught, and it's something that gets overlooked. But again, it's one of those things where, again, when we trace it back, it's easy to network when your family members are a part of the network. When your friends, right, or your friends or your family members are part of the network. When you go, and with a lot of our communities where a lot of us are the first of, right, we don't got nobody to network with. We don't got nobody to network with. So if it ain't for people who are, over, right, over the hill, who already went through the door, if it ain't for them coming back and say, oh, let me go network this. I see this person, they're in pre-med, they want to do, come over here, let me get you. If we don't do that, right, it's a problem, right? Like, because we're going to be in trouble, right? So yeah, networking, I think, is so key. So key. Let's see here. So asking why is skin color application? Oh, they know why they put skin color in the application. We know. George Costanza. Let's see here. Like Obama said, African American affirmative action should be economic. Should not be economic based, if anything at all. SCOTUS got it right. Again, like I said, it'd be great, right? It'd be great if the economics was the only thing that played a factor, right? But we know that's not the case. We know that economics ties in to where this person lives, whether this person had to work during school, whether their parents had to work, whether their parents had to send money, what type of schools they went to, what type of teaching, Kaplan, Princeton, whatever stuff that they got, whatever. We know that. So we know that isn't just like, oh, just focus on economics. So SES focus, because there's already been studies that show that if I factor in those who come from the same communities, let's say they're not impoverished, right? They got money, middle class, boom, boom, boom. And then they still compare them to other groups, right? For some reason, there's still a disparity, right? So that would only make sense that if we like standardize for our socioeconomic status, and we had equal percentages there, but it's not, right? And the reason why it's not is because systemically, and again, I know y'all hate to hear this, systemically, there are forces that have been at play, will be at play, continue to be at play, that make it difficult for us to get to where we need to get to. Let's see. Someone asked me someone asked me what my MCAT score was. I don't even remember. What was my MCAT score? Oh, I had to look it up. Oh my God. Yeah, it's been a while. Sorry, y'all. Someone said racism finally removed. No. It's not there. It's there. And like I said, one of the things I will say again, a lot of these schools, the Harvards of the West, they were already, again, since 2016, they were already preparing for decisions like this already. So they were already looking to see, all right, how do I move this goalpost here to increase our diversity? Because we're not dumb, and we recognize how important diversity is to the mission of our school, right? This decision again is not going to affect the Harvards of the world. Harvard they're gonna move, especially because this decision says nothing about legacy. Because it says now, if you would have said, hey, you know what, we're striking down legacy admissions, oh boy. Oh, it would be, it'd be some problems. It'd be some trouble. But because it's not doing that, they're okay. Let's see here. Someone asked my opinion on socioeconomic based admission. I think it definitely plays a factor, right? Especially when we talk about like financial aid, right? Because again, if I'm a lower SES, meaning that I have lower means, right? And like, I'm going to need more assistance, right? To pay for y'all schooling, right? Because some of these schools are, like I said, I went to Nova. Nova's crazy expensive, right? So like, I'm going to need more assistance, right? So please factor that in if you're looking. And again, most of these colleges, if there were incentives, right? If there were incentives to get applicants from more lower SES populations, they would do it as well too, right? It's just financially, there's no incentives for them to do it. Let's see. Let's see here. Want to make sure we don't. Yeah, no, they are not rejecting legacy. Because trust me, if they were rejecting legacy, it'd be a lot more movement. Hope she not be given. Affirmative action is racism in reality. Right? Too funny. Right. But again, like I said, and the reason why I like these highlight, I don't want to highlight these comments because to give them shine, but I want people to recognize that there are a lot of people who think like this. Like the Jace Fowler, there are a lot of people who think that affirmative action is racist, right? Now, and again, they say racism, and even though if I tell you that white women benefited the most of affirmative action, they still equate affirmative action with racism. Like think of try to make that correlation. I say the biggest group who benefit off affirmative action is white women. You say affirmative action is racist. What are we talking about here? We're having two different conversations. All right. And once you recognize that, like, oh, this group much more beneficial, much benefited way more than us of affirmative action. Like, why did it, like, then like, oh, I see what the game plan is here. That's too funny. All right. And then, it's actually good. This is a good point right here, right? So, someone says, they need to give more money to HBCUs because they're only willing to do the work of supporting POC. So, obviously, especially when we think about foundationally, why we again, think about this. Why do we have to have HBCUs? Why was it so important for us to even establish HBCUs, right? Like, if you just, again, one of my attendings always taught me, if you ask the question why, you'll get a lot of answers, right? So if you start asking yourself, man, why did they even have to even establish HBCUs, right? When you see people in 2023 talking about there's no systemic racism, right? Like, that's when you're like, okay, fam, then why do we have HBCUs? Like, if there's no systemic racism, why did we have to say, you know what? We need to have dedicated colleges to teach people of color, right? Especially Black folks, right? We need to have dedicated colleges to teach Black people, right? You don't do that unless there are systemic forces saying, I can't go to the other ones. Like, unless there's systemic forces saying, you can't come over here, but we'll let you go over there, right? And one thing, first of all, shout out to HBCUs, but I don't want people to look at HBCUs as the backup, right? A lot of these HBCUs, again, I went to Florida State. FAMU was right down the street. A lot of these HBCUs are right there and above in a lot of different programs, right? So we should not be looking at HBCUs like they're just a backup. Like, I'll just settle for the HBCU. Nah, fam, because you're going to get rejected from there too. Don't be shocked when you also get rejected from there as well too. So I don't want us to look at that. And yes, obviously we should support. We should support. I definitely should support them, because especially with the way they try to play us. But I don't want us to look at it like there's some subpar level of education that we're like, all right, I'll just go to HB. Like, no, that should not be the case here. Now, should they give more money, more support? 100%. But we should look at it like, oh, well, now that affirmative action is out, let's start going to the HBCUs. Like, I don't want us to go that there. Someone asked, the only reason you made it because I'm Black? Maybe. Someone said this is great news for Asian students. No, it's not. And again, the reason why I say no, it's not, because again, it was never discriminatory against Asian students. So they're not going to see a bump in their admissions because there's no quote unquote affirmative action. Like, that's not going to happen, right? Because if they ain't legacy, it don't matter. And if they have great grades and great test scores, guess what? They're just going to pair to all of the other Asians with great grades and test scores, and then like, hey, y'all fight it out over there. Let's see. All right. Someone. Oh, so let's respond to Amanda or Ricky. We got a couple more. We're gonna respond to a couple more things, then we're gonna get up out of here. Am I angry Black man, or do I agree with the Supreme Court? I hope I gave no impression that I agree with the Supreme Court. Right. I hope I don't. And the angry black man. Yes, I'm angry. Right. And you should be angry too, Amando, Ricky. Like you should be angry too. That this BS of a discriminatory practice that is affirmative action like made it to the Supreme Court. You should be angry that they're wasting their tax dollars with this BS message. Right. That's what you should be angry with. But yeah, no. I definitely 100% do not agree with the Supreme Court. And yes, I am angry as well. And that ain't negative to me. Like, it's never been a negative from my standpoint to be angry. I know that's a trope that they like to do to our black women, and call them angry and try to diminish their message. It don't work over here because we be having a lot of reasons to be angry. Let's see here. So, this is a good question. We'll get this question in before we get out of here. Who does this hurt or help? Right. So legacy kids. Whew, I mean, because if you had a sliver of onus that hey, we definitely need to look at this specific population and make sure we get some spots here. Guess what? They're just going to fill it with more legacy folks. They're like, hey, all right, you know what? Legacy folks, like, here you go. Right. And in that same ilk, the people who are likely going to be hurt are those who don't have the network, who aren't legacy, who don't, again, because mind you, test scores and grades are coming. Like, that's going to happen. Like, you don't even, like, and that's why I say, especially for the Harvards of the world, if you're applying over there, like, you got the numbers, right? So it's really just a matter of, do you have the numbers plus the extracurricular stuff? Right. So it's those who don't have the extracurricular stuff or who don't get the bump for the extracurricular stuff who are really going to be affected by this decision. And again, because it starts at the top, that's why I'm mentioning it from a healthcare perspective. Right. I'm telling you that because we're going to have less and less people applying, we're going to have less and less people getting accepted, which means we have less and less people graduating from these undergraduate institutions. And then going to post-professional, law school, medical school, engineering, all these other like less and less people there, right? Which will eventually affect the communities that they typically serve, right? It's usually the case, not all the time, but it's usually the case. So those are going to be your downwind effects of people who get hurt by this decision here. The front-loaded decision is, yes, you're going to have less numbers there. Again, the same, like Harvard's never going to not fill or whatever. I don't know what the number is. They're never going to not fill. Plenty of people apply. Plenty of people are still going to get rejected. Plenty of people are still going to be upset, right? And what's really going to be is those who now we're going to get super upset and not get accepted, and they're going to have no clue why. Like, what do you mean? I have all the grades. I have all this. What do you mean I can't get in? Nope, you're not here. You're not Harvard quality, right? You're going to see that You're going to see that happen a lot. Oh, let's see here. All right, so I gotta go take care of some sick patients and do my call. But I appreciate everyone joining the live. It was pretty hyped today. I appreciate everybody joining. Again, we just want y'all to be blessed, right? And just understand, like with decision right here. It's again. I'm gonna call on my colleagues, call on my my professionals that like, hey, like we got to do more. Right, because Supreme Court doing what the Supreme Court do. So again, if you're a pre-med or even medical student, you have any questions, concerns, please follow, DM me. I'm always available. It's probably easy. In fact, it's probably easier to because I think TikTok lets you DM if you don't follow. Because I got a lot of people following me, so I want to know. So yeah, that's it. All right, so y'all be blessed. Y'all have a great evening. See y'all guys tomorrow.